afternoon everybody. Long time no real Meccano videos. Been doing other things, we've had a good summer, but here's one I've done quite recently. Initially it's a 1961 streamlined sports car from an outfit number 4 from that period, although it is much changed. Some things have been changed just because I preferred the look of my own design and thoughts, if you like, compared to the original. Some of them have been changed due to necessity, i.e. losing weight and adding a motor. The overall car is quite nice. It's what you call a monocoque design really. There's no real chassis on the original design. Certainly without the infill sides at the front to make it fully streamlined, as you can still got the rear streamlining as per more or less the original design. The front of the structure is very weak, and it's essentially just these couple of bolts that stop it all from flopping up and down there, because it's all flexible plates. And of course it's a number 4 set model, so it's a bit weird, but essentially it does work. There's no motor in the original. I say it does work, most of it works. The steering doesn't in the original design. We'll come on to that when we have a look underneath, if you can see it, because of my additions. I've called this an Austin Healeyish. Really, it's nothing like an Austin Healeyish. It sort of reminded me a bit of one. I thought it was more like a Daimler, and someone on the meccanozone.com Facebook page said it was probably more like an Austin Atlantic, and yet I can see that. Now this has been changed, tweaked and altered so much now, you can't really call it an outfit model, set model build. It's still looks pretty much like the original. Let's say it's been refined. I can't remember really how long it took to build the original model. Not that I built it all exactly as the design for a start, and never bothered with the infill for the front, which may provide some structural strength, but I ain't looked at it that close because I never got that far with that part. Rough guess, the whole thing included all my additions and alterations and tweaks, probably about 10 or 12 hours I would say, and a very rough guess I would say about 3 to 4 hours for the original design. Well, shall we say 90% of that. I've removed bolts here and there where not required to get the weight down. For example, here, behind here is a trunnion, and it had a bolt there. Don't need it. This set was a eBay buy, the initial set, and it was complete apart from one nut and bolt, I think. I think it's about 20 odd quid. The box is okay. The tray is very good for the plastic of the period. It usually just disintegrates now, but it wasn't a bad buy. Perhaps I paid towards the top end of its condition overall, but it's okay. With the model made, it was always in my mind to add a motor, which meant really a magic motor, or an X series motor if you call them that. The original little motors, clockwork of course, for the X series Meccano sets of the 1930s. I've got about 5, tested them all and picked the best one ish. The actual best one didn't have a pulley on it, but there we go. So we'll come on to all that in a bit more detail when we can see it better underneath, but regarding weight reduction in general, as you can see here, the windscreen frame is narrow strips, modern narrow strips and angle brackets. It was originally full-size green strips. Didn't look particularly neat, but I managed to save a little bit of weight there, and it does look better. Same here, the sides. That was originally a 5-hole standard green strip. The area inside here, if you like call this the door area, that was a wheel disc either side, which was very supportive, but did get in the way and of course added weight that I wanted to get rid of. So they've come out. Various incarnations of fish plates have replaced that. Going back to this strip here, I put it there. I do have some actual green ones, which must be quite rare, of the period roughly, in just about the right green. I think they're a bit cracked, but they're pretty good. But I chose the zinc to sort of represent the chrome strips that you get on top of doors of cars of this sort of period. Incidentally, the pictures that I used were from a 1963 Austin Healey 3000. But again, it's not really Austin Healey, hence the Healeyish name. But the details I've added do represent in part, and very basically, details on an Austin Healey. So in my quest to make the model a little bit more interesting, the weight has increased, which once it increases then I start looking at how I've done it. Can I do it lighter? Can I remove something else? Now initially, spoiler alert for you, this went about 7 feet on carpet. The initial say foot or so was slightly downhill, but with the tin wheels I dare say there was a bit of wheel slip because they don't really grip very well. I would like to add the French tin wheels for a bit more detailed look. On the lookout for some of those if you've got any or know where there are any good condition ones. I did think I might have to, for the full, what turned out to be the final test, have to change the rear wheels for 2-inch pulleys with some O-rings on just to get grip. Didn't have to, because I went to work. Yes, and on my break I videoed it in the kitchen. The lighting is not very good, so I apologise for that now. Details, well, let's have a look. Already mentioned the windscreen. We'll come on to inside the car later. It is a light car in its original design, but now it is, as you can imagine, a fair bit heavier, but not too bad. The headlights, I was going to fit some of those sort of teardrop shaped plastic lights off the Ducati 1200S motorbike set. I ain't got no spares there with those, so might not have looked very good, but I was going to try them anyway. For indicators, dummy of course, we just got small, almost clear, orange plastic spacers, which is a bit awkward to see, isn't it, when they're on, because the bolt hides them, but you can see them there. The grille, tried several variants of that. That was the best looking sort of open mouth grille I could come up with sort of standard parts. Spot lamps, not really big enough, but my trick of essentially screwing a bolt through the small opaque rubber grommets, well, probably not rubber, are they? The overriders for the bumpers, 2L narrow strips layered, I think 4 or 5 in each one. A bumper, pretty simple construction there. Around the back, again bumper, spaced out with washers and small black plastic spacers to get it away from the bodywork, just inside there and there. Overriders, same idea as the front, but with obtuse narrow angle brackets, not straight 2-hole narrow strips. Rear lights, I did use some moulded plastic modern light dummy lights off, I forget what set they was off now. Oh yes, the Mountain Rally set from a couple of years ago. That was okay, but neither of them are perfect, I suppose, neither these or the others. These are more in keeping, I think, with the design of the car. The others perhaps look too modern. So we've got red plastic spacers there for the brake lights, more orange ones there. The bolt does spoil the view of it, but yeah, well. Spare wheel, that wasn't on the original. What was an original feature of the design was a hinge plate forming this section here, the rear boot lid. This doesn't open, although I have thought about that, and the other half down here. Now that's heavy. I took the pin out of the hinge, removed the one half of that hinge plate, and made up this structure inside here using curved flexible plates. That one's a little bit later, but it's the only one I got. Unfortunately, there was an extra one of the set period in the set, which is that one. These are from the Empire State Building set from, oh, I don't know now, probably 8-10 years ago maybe. The one that's got the flat girder plates in for most of the construction. I had to take that apart to get some nuts and bolts and bits and pieces, and I thought that looks sort of a leathery colour, so I'll use those. There is a slight disadvantage to my design inside, but we'll come on to that when we can get a good look at it. As you can see, it's quite a nice looking car. A bit flimsy in places. Underneath the bonnet area could do with strengthening a little bit, but that is more or less as the original design. And it's a nice size as well. Now I know it's awkward to see the steering due to my extra bracing, which I'll explain later. What you see green beneath that is essentially, well, almost as per the design. There has been some tweaks. The main problem with the design, and you do have to bear in mind it's only number 4 set, there is a lot of 1-bolt fixings to hold this to the body, which basically fits underneath the bonnet. In my tweaks to get the steering to work and be more reliable overall, almost all the 1-bolt fixings have been removed, either by adding extra brackets, and some of them from parts in the set as well, although I've had to add extra nuts and bolts. The steering itself is pretty like it was. Not totally, because it wouldn't work. All this area for the steering itself, not too bad. What I did do, using, I remember now, there was 2 other strips missing, 2 5L strips missing, which are these inside here and one there, so they're slightly different colour, but they weren't used for that part. So what I did, I added them in, and that made all this construction here, the green construction, a lot more solid. Now the steering column did not have two columns, as it were. There were no gears, and it was held together with pulleys, 1-inch pulleys, and at the end you tied string to the 1-inch pulley and you tied the string to the steering up here. It did turn quite well one way, but it would not turn the other way. The actual mounting using the formed slotted strips I've actually used again. There are some additional bits and pieces which you may just be able to see, but to help support the axles, I'll get a decent shot, I think you see there. There's a nut and bolt underneath the axles just to help support, because you are using a slot there, and the gears are to reverse the action, because otherwise when you turn the steering wheel the wheels will turn the opposite way to the way you turn the steering wheel. Now I'll show you the steering in action. It's a bit awkward from this angle, but there you can see turning the steering wheel, which is a bush wheel, inside the cab, and as you can see they do turn. They would have turned a little bit more, but my bracing does get in the way a little bit. But there was a glaring error in the original design, and that was the fixing of the wheels to the steering involved spring clips here, but there's not enough room for the spring clips to rotate, and therefore they catch the steering mechanism, or the mount for it really, and the wheels can't go round. So absolutely useless in its original design. Now for the steering to work I needed ball joints, but apart from ones which I found rather late in the build and after I'd sorted this from the 10 model, what was the multi-model set, dinosaur set or whatever it was called, but dinosaur set anyway, from about 2 years ago, where there is some ball joints to make things like tails and spines, that sort of thing, although they're probably a bit big for this. But I need to have a flexible-ish sort of coupling at each end due to the odd angles. We've got a 1-inch by 1/2-inch obtuse angle bracket. That is fixed to this 3-hole standard strip there, 1.5-inch long. And as you can see it's very loose. That play on the bolts that they're fixed to each end allows it to move around and sort of work like a ball joint. As you can imagine, all these tweaks were very much trial and error, so that's why it takes quite a while to do, and then you probably find some better way of doing it, which means taking it apart again and so on. So with the motor fitted, the motor in itself being awkward, the Magic motors, or the X series, now that's a blue one so it's like 80 years old. We'll have a closer look at that and show you what trouble I had mounting it. And there you are, the 80-year-old motor, which is a pretty decent runner. Offload it only runs about 45 seconds. Geared down of course, not too heavy a vehicle, it does work quite well. It was the X series motor, and the X series has a lot more holes. Therefore, well, from this angle, the height of the motor, which is from the camera going away from you, is about 4 holes, which is not really a standard amount of hole spacing with Meccano. A 5-hole strip is as common as a common thing. 4 holes, yes, they ain't uncommon, but a lot less used. The style of the mounting is awkward too. If you look here especially, I couldn't fit the motor flush on the bodywork due to other mounts and other fixings for other parts of the body. But look at this for one example of how awkward it is. Look how close the spring is to that nut. It just clears, it really just clears, and as it happens, by the time the car stops on its wind, the spring doesn't really get past that anyway, which I suppose is lucky. So a little bit of thought required on mounting the motor. Now it's only fixed at the bottom, not at the top, and that's where all this extra bracing has helped. So you see this here, that goes to the front, and this bit here and this bit here, that goes to the side of the car. This goes to the bracing almost in the middle of the car. The original key for this period of motor is a bit bigger than the later cast key, so I couldn't get it in, so I had to make my own key using a coupling, a short one from a #1 clock kit, axle and some collars, and it was like a sliding T-bar, and I secured it onto the shaft just by screwing the grub screw in, and it stayed on, but of course that was more weight. When I eventually found a later cast one, I found that I could remove my made up one, and as long as it is in a decent position, the shaft that is, I can get the later key on and off, so that saved me weight there. All this bracing here helps to support the motor. There is some flex, mind, and it's a bit awkward and it's a bit odd, look, just to get the angles to the side of the bodywork and on the other side as well. Here's the rest of the bracing underneath. Initially the car was quite twisted, although all four wheels did sit nicely on the surface. All this bracing has helped that no end. At the back of the car now, probably my favourite bit of detail. Not sure I really needed these rubber grommets fitted in, but they're in. There's no harm being there, you can't see them. The exhaust is in roughly the right place for an Austin Healey, although the pipes tend to be curved down away from the bodywork at the end, but I'm not bending these rod connectors. So you've got two rod connectors, two 1-inch axles inside, and a clamp formed of two 3L narrow strips, some washers, etc., nuts and bolts. You'd think that'd be easy to do, wouldn't you? But no, because the exhaust is quite close together, the two pipes on the real thing are quite close together. So I wanted to replicate that as best I could. Hence the clamp, as you see here. And yeah, that's probably my favourite bit of detail. That worked quite well, and it's fairly secure too. Inside the car now, and all this was put in after the transmission was completed. Because of the bits and bobs to do with the transmission, I haven't put any floor in, which would add weight, or any seat bases, which I have had some ideas on that. The initial ideas would have been quite a bit of weight added, but they're going to have to sit quite high up anyway, but I may do that. So with all the transmission in, it does look a bit of a mess in there. So I tried to hide it best I could, and there are some odd angles to get around, which you can, just about. And we've got basically a central console in the middle. We've got a dummy gear stick, and we've got a dummy handbrake lever as well. The problem with the Magic motor is you can't change the pulley on the motor. Off the 1/2-inch pulley on the motor, up here, we come to a 1-inch pulley, and I know it's very awkward to see, which is here. That gives us 2-to-1 ratio. We've got an 1/2-inch pulley just there. That's just to another 1/2-inch pulley to get me further back along the car. There's the second 1/2-inch pulley onto a third, if you like, on this axle, this intermediate axle here. I've had to make up the axle out of 2 axles because I haven't got any long enough. I've only got a few 5.5-inch axles. And this comes from 1/2-inch to this 1.5-inch pulley here. So overall we've got a 5-to-1 ratio. As you will see in a bit, it's not quick, but that little Magic motor does rather well. One thing I should have mentioned earlier on, right at the beginning of the video really, is that you may hear other voices. I've had a couple of years where nobody's lived next door. I have now. Quite thin floors, ceilings, walls, that sort of thing in some parts, so you may hear that odd muffled voice at times in the videos. I was going to move into Studio 2, that's the bedroom, but the lighting isn't very good in this one, let alone in there, even with 2 spot lamps and 4 heads in total, work lights, LED work lights. So there you are folks, my Austin Healey-ish. Nice model, works well, as we shall see now. Bye for now.